Hi folks, my name is Linda Emmett and welcome to Happiness is an Inside Job. We are the creators of our own reality, we create our own lives. Our mind is our biggest limit and it's our own beliefs, behaviours and habits constantly caught in those cycles that keep us trapped where we are and stand in the way of our own happiness. So throughout this podcast, we're going to take a deep dive into some of those beliefs, habits and patterns, where they show up in your lives and what you can do to change them. Hi folks, and welcome to this week's podcast. What we're going to be taking a dive into this week is anxiety in relationships. How it shows up, the impact it has, and what we can do to move ourselves out of that space and be in a healthier, happier relationship. So first, what we're going to do is we're going to look at what the signs are of anxiety within our relationships. And the very first sign that we'll all start noticing is that we're constantly overthinking. We're near obsessed with the relationship. We're overthinking every comment, every phrase, what the other person is saying. And I just want to point out, folks, this doesn't only show up within our sexual or partner relationships. This can show up within our friendships, within familial relationships, all across all of our relationships, but it's most common within our partner or sexual relationship. So one of the ways, as I mentioned, it shows up is through overthinking relentlessly, worrying, distressing ourselves about what the other person's doing, what the other person's thinking, when we constantly need reassurance from that other person that, you know, they want to see us, they want to be around us, that they think enough of us, where we're constantly seeking out that reassurance outside of ourselves, or we're in that space where we have a relentless desire to please them, where we're people pleasing constantly, and our aim is to keep that other person happy. It's to keep them pleased, because as we know, folks, you know, another person's happiness is not on us and it cannot come from us. But if we're in a space where we're constantly trying to please the other person, or we're, again, in line with the overthinking, we're interpreting or trying to interpret every single word they say, we're thinking deeply into it, or their actions, how they're reacting. If they say to us, you know, well, I want to go out and meet my friends, I want to see other friends, or I'm busy, I'm doing this today. If we're viewing all of that as the sign of a problem, a sign we're turning it back on ourselves. Well, if they want to see those other people or do those other activities, that means they don't want to see me. What is it I'm doing wrong? And responding from that space, it can make us really unhappy, and again drive that anxiety within ourselves and leave us in a very anxious space in our relationships. And it's like, for our mind, it's like having like a constant background noise going on, a constant worry that's distracting us even when we're not around that person, and it rips a lot of the joy, the fun and the happiness out of those relationships that we're in. So now looking at where it tends to stem from, what actually creates it within our relationships. And one of the things it really stems from is a lack of trust in other people, that they will be there, that if they see all of you and know all of you, that you can trust them not to run a mile, not to run the other way, not to abandon you or reject you or reject parts of you. So it's a fear of who you are, and as I say, when you show yourself to the other person, that they're just going to, you know, dump and run away, run a mile like. And this is usually where the anxiety stems from. Or when we're questioning, you know, are we compatible with them? Are they our person? Are we connecting with them? And this is where our people pleasing can tend to show up, when we're seeking and looking at what it is they do, what it is they love, their values, and we're trying to be that. We're trying to be everything that we think they want us to be. We start losing sight of ourselves. And when we're living in that space, that breeds anxiety, because the fear is, if they see who we truly are, they'll leave. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if we're not showing ourselves, we're not opening up, we're not opening our hearts, that other person in the end has no choice but to leave, because you can't build a relationship on that. So working on our anxiety is absolutely powerful. We're in our relationships for them to be happy and be everything that we want them to be, for them to be a safe space that we can show up, get the support, get the love we need, and reciprocate that. Give it out to the other person. Now, on saying this, folks, I just want to quickly mention that some level of anxiety, a small level of anxiety within our relationships, is normal. We do anxiety, we feel a baseline level of anxiety when something is important to us. Like we need to get to the airport on time, we need to submit a project, homework, all of these things. We will feel a baseline level of anxiety that gets us moving. When we want, to see the person on another day, or we want to meet up with that friend again, and you send that text, and for a moment you get little butterflies in your stomach while you're waiting on the response, or things like this. They're normal, but when they're impacting your behaviours and your actions, that's when your anxiety is crossing the line, and it's impacting your relationships negatively. So where you'll start really seeing this, and some very clear signs of it, are when you notice that you're relentlessly texting someone, or waiting, or watching your phone, waiting on the text, is when you're reinterpreting negatively everything that that person is saying. When no matter what they say, you're diluting it, you're dissecting it, you're neglecting other pieces of your life because you're all but obsessed about this particular person or their behaviours or how they're impacting you. If it's having a direct negative impact on your life, that's when the anxiety is getting out of control. That's when we need to be looking at what we can do within ourselves to start making changes there. When we're in an anxious space within our relationships, it can actually have the absolute opposite effect. Like if our intention and our plan is for us to build that closeness, get closer to them, build on that love or lust, or build on that friendship, wherever it is, or whatever space it is in your life, we can actually have the opposite effect. We can begin to start pushing them away, because if we're anxious that they're going to abandon us anyway, or reject us anyway, our drive can be sometimes to nearly get in there first. Well, I'll ignore them, I won't respond, I'll tell them I'm not available, and we start bringing these behaviours in, which are literally sabotaging the relationship itself, for the anxious fear that this person is going to leave or abandon you anyway. So it can have a massive impact on the health of your relationships. We can also swing the absolute other way, where we're obsessed about it, as I say, checking our phone constantly, ringing them a number of times, jumping to conclusions every time they respond to us, or every time they say something, or misinterpreting their behaviours. Just because we show emotion and love in a particular way, if they're not showing it back in that particular way, we can interpret that as they don't feel the same as us, they don't want to see us, they don't want to be with us. And we can spend hours then obsessing or trying to literally decode someone else's behaviour because we're feeling anxious, rather than ask the questions, rather than build that communication and build that closeness and say, I feel love, or I feel you care if you're doing things like this, or if you're showing things like this. A lot of it is in the communication, but instead what we find ourselves doing is dissecting everything that they're saying, or every behaviour that they're having, and building that anxiety to the point you have yourself bags packed out the door, or never seen them again, which will really hurt you. Which is, as I say, it's your own self-sabotage, and you're creating that reality yourself by how you're behaving. So looking at some of where, first off, anxiety is stemming from, why it's showing up in your relationships, can help you start to move through the anxiety process, and start then building that secure attachment within your relationship. So about 80-90% of anxiety in relationship stems from our attachment style, our attachment patterns, and these develop in early childhood. As a child, we'll have or develop a particular attachment style, particular coping mechanisms, how we react when we feel people aren't attaching to us, the things we do. And from this, from the experiences we get from our parents or our early caregivers, that can hugely shape how we attach to other people in our adult life. And depending on the consistency and the level of love we get and how, say, our parents showed love, this shapes our mind to how we believe love should be shown. And if we're not getting that from our partners or friends in that way, we can then deem it that they just don't love us the same. They're not as interested as us, when in fact, they just possibly learned to show love a different way. So again, communication and understanding and watching what that other person does. It might not show up in what they say or through touch, but it may show up in everything that they do for you. So opening your mind from that anxious perspective and looking at ways that others, even as I say down to friends, ways they show that they care and what possibly their love language is, because we all have different styles. And going back to the, like, from early childhood, we can learn either how to express or repress particular emotions, ways of getting our physical and emotional needs met. We can either learn very young that we should suppress these emotions or express them. And as children, we can often learn to express them coming from, depending on our caregiver style, coming from an anxious space where the child gets into a real panic when they need something, and that's when the parent responds. So in our adult lives, this is what we've learned, how to get our needs met. If we're really needy, we're clingy, we're throwing tantrums, different things like this, rather than communicating from what we actually want. And they're maladaptive behaviours that become enmeshed in our adult patterns. And it's looking at these. I have a full podcast that we did, I think last year, on attachment styles. So if you do want to understand a bit more about your own attachment style and see where it's shown up in your relationships, and what sometimes we use different styles in different relationships, we're different with family to how we are with friends, to how we are with partners. But it's great in giving you an awareness and insight into how you show up in your relationships and which relationships you show up in which way. And this is where you can begin to do the work, because the bottom line is being really anxious and fearful and scared that people are going to leave or walk away is really, really not a nice way for you to be feeling day to day, and the impact it's having on your behaviours. And then we're possibly feeling guilty about having those behaviours in the first place, feeling embarrassed or humiliated. And again, this is just driving a cycle for us. So that is probably 90%, that our attachment styles is probably 90% of the impact in our adult relationships to us showing up anxious. But another one that does have impact is our past relationships as adults, especially the very first ones we have. The very first relationships that we have as adults after our parents tend to be hugely shaped by what we learned from our parents. We're going out into the world and we're going out with those learned behaviours. And if when you've had your first love, as it's called, you know, if you first went out into the world and you've been cheated on or been rejected by someone that you really fancied or you're mad about, this can usually shape how you're now going into your relationships in the present. Our brains can literally be encoded by particular things that really pain us. Our brain will imprint, and it's, you know, it's hardwired into our brain circuitry. And what we can sometimes do is associate certain traits like smells, sounds, feelings that we got in that past relationship that hurt us, and if we're picking them up in our new relationship, that's hardwired into your past experience, into your circuitry, and these things can be triggering you in the present relationship. So being aware that just because that person possibly likes the same music, which is the sounds, that may be triggering you, or wears the same aftershave, or uses the same shit, and them scents are literally triggering your system and triggering anxiety. This by no means means that they're the same person. So bringing yourself into the present and recognizing that just because there's little similarities, that's possibly just what you're attracted to. But this is a completely different person, and you've learned from previous experience and seen things in the present and not allowing your mind based them on past experiences you've had, because then you're living in the past as opposed to living in the present, and you're bringing your fears from past relationships into your present relationships. So having an awareness around that will make a huge difference, and starting to notice where that may be showing up in your present relationships. And finally, one of the things we really have to bear in mind, especially when we're going into a new relationship, is our body's response, our physical, our chemical response to a new relationship, because this in itself can actually cause us to feel quite anxious and it's somewhat overwhelmed. When we first enter a new relationship, your whole body produces large amounts of really, really powerful chemicals. Like your oxytocin, the love, the bonding, dopamine, levels of cortisol, which will spike our system, and vasopressin. I can never say that right. Vasopressin. That's it. Our body emits loads of these. And when these are all combined, they're known as the love chemicals. And these create our bonding and our commitment. But when we're getting surges of these in our body, like excitement and excitement and anxiety can feel the same to us if we're not stopping and recognizing the difference. It's what we tell ourselves that feeling is. So if we're getting huge surges of chemicals that are flooding through our system, that in itself can make us feel anxious, a bit overwhelmed. So recognizing that this is your natural body's response, it does dissipate somewhat. And it's normal to feel a little anxiety, but recognize that this is a beautiful space you're in. Like, this is your body reaching the height of those bonding, loving, sexual attraction, those type of feelings, you know, those that just ignite your passion. But as I say, it can sometimes be overwhelming for us, or we feel we're going to lose control or give up our lives for this other person, or all of this stuff can start going on in our head. So being aware that it's okay to feel this, and that we're not, you know, emotionally unstable or being hijacked by our emotions, that's a choice. It's in the actions we make from them is where, you know, we have the control. But as I say, these emotions, and in a new relationship, you know, the hugging, kissing, all the touch things, the affection, the sex, all of that can send our hormones. We're hardwired for it. So all that can send those chemicals and our hormones nearly into overdrive. We get such beautiful feelings, such natural body responses from these things, that there's a part of you that, you know, wants it all the time. And there's all of that aspect, and this can drive anxiety. This can trigger us into thinking, oh my God, am I, you know, going to drop everything else? Or we can run, literally gallop on a horse after these emotions and these feelings and these chemical responses. But they do dissipate a bit, and recognizing that it's okay to feel like that. But where the fear can show up is we get all these beautiful feelings and these lovely chemicals rushing and flooding through our body. We really, really love them, but rather than enjoy them, our mind can kick in and just be telling us, oh my God, what if you lose this? What if it leaves? What if they don't like who you are? What if, you know, they reject you or abandon you? I'm going to be brokenhearted. I'll be devastated. I'll be left home alone, and I'll have to buy a dog, a cat and a budgie. All of these things can come flooding in, and it stops us enjoying the moment, and we start building anxiety about the person leaving or abandoning us, which is a reality we're creating in our heads. So keeping yourself present and allowing yourself to really enjoy the space that you're in. And some other ways of possibly combating the anxiety and working on it and bringing some more safety and security into your relationships is very first, and the most powerful, is building awareness around them. We need to understand what's showing up to begin to change it. So as I mentioned, recognizing and understanding your own attachment styles. I have, as many of us do, different attachment styles in different types of relationships. My attachment style within my friendships is very different to my attachment style in my friendships, say, would be safe and secure. I feel very safe and secure within my friendships. Within relationships, I have to work on avoidance. That would very much be my style within partner relationships. So that's something I've had to work on over the years. So understanding your own style and where it's shown up within your relationships, because depending on the experiences we've had, we show up differently in each. So as I mentioned, you can go back and listen to the previous podcast on understanding your own attachment style. And again, within line of that, looking at your own paradigm that you have about relationships, whichever one or ones that you're showing up a bit anxious in. What is it you believe about these relationships? What is it you've seen or felt in the past that you've built a story around? You've built a reality around. This is going to happen if I do this, or this happens in all relationships. Understanding yourself, and then getting to the root, as I do the work in, is getting to the root of your own negative beliefs. We can often be in lack within ourselves, feeling like we're not good enough, smart enough, sexy enough, whatever it is, and feel that this person is more or better than we are. So working on our own, getting to the root of our own negative beliefs, because that triggers the anxiety. If we're always trying to be more and do more to be good enough for this person, and this is where the people pleasing and all those things show up. So understanding your own negative beliefs. And lastly, but most importantly, it's holding on to the fact that happiness is an inside job. Our role, our purpose, above all else, is our own happiness. And working on that within, by getting to the root of your negative beliefs, understanding your paradigm, the stories you're telling yourself within your relationships, that builds on your happiness. Because if you can dissipate a lot of the gunk and the crap that you've been carrying and burdening yourself with, that then starts building your own happiness, which also changes who you're going for or accepting of in the first place. If our self-worth is low, that's where we're choosing from. So working on your own happiness is powerful for all the relationships that you have and how you show up in your relationships. And it hugely impacts internally how you're feeling each and every day. So that by far is the most powerful and most important. And just remember it, you do not have to be any more than who you are and what you are right now. You deserve love as the human being that you are. But working on the anxiety in the background will get you into that space where you're enjoying your relationships more across all aspects of our lives. So that's it for me for this week, guys. I hope you really enjoyed it and got some fabulous takeaways. And as always, I invite you to connect in with me across social media, or check me out on my website, www.yourgifttoyou.com, or email me, linda@yourgifttoyou.com, guys, because I'd love to hear from you and any topics you'd like for us to talk about or any more learnings that you want. And please remember, give me those reviews because it keeps the podcast getting out there to more people. So chat to you very soon, guys. Bye-bye.